Today we're going to be learning about cooking in ancient Greece and about the major food crops that the ancient Greeks grew. A typical meal in ancient Greece would almost always include three main things: grains, grapes, and olives. So let's learn about those three first. The main grain that was grown in ancient Greece was wheat. Before wheat was grown, barley was grown, and barley continued to still be grown. Barley was a little bit easier to grow, so even if we had a really bad crop year where there wasn't any rain, we would still be able to harvest barley. But wheat was a little tastier, and so the Greeks preferred wheat. So grains were made mostly into bread in Greece. They were also made into porridge, but the Greeks really favored bread. And the kind of bread that you had was determined a lot by your social status and how much money you had. So if you were really poor, you probably had barley bread. And whole grain barley bread was a dark bread that was kind of crunchy. And then if you had a little bit more money, you would have had wheat bread, and it would have been whole grain wheat bread. But wheat bread was a lot lighter, and so people liked it better. If you were richer, or if it was a super special occasion, you might have been able to get a bread that wasn't completely whole grain. They did try to grind up the flour and sieve out the extra bran and germ a little bit to make a lighter flour, but even those flours still had a lot of the germ and the bran. You can see in the little picture down at the corner the picture of the actual grain of wheat and how it's got all three parts to it. It's got the endosperm, which is the white part that is for the white flour, but then it has the germ and bran, which are also included in whole grain flour. So basically, ancient Greeks ate whole grains just about all the time. What about rice? Rice was introduced into Greece when Alexander the Great came back from his travels way into India, where he found rice and brought it back. So for a long time in Greece, rice was considered really special and even just medicinal, not really eaten much as a food. Grapes were another main crop in Greece, and grapes were grown for the fruit because grapes are, of course, a nice fruit, but they were mainly grown for wine. And the Greeks had wine with almost every meal, but it was watered down. So they would mix the wine with water and drink it that way. And wine was one really good way for Greeks to make sure they were drinking pure water that wasn't contaminated with anything, because once you go through the fermentation process of making wine, the water is then safe to drink. And then when they drank it mixed with water, it wasn't very strong. And the ancient Greeks also even ate grape leaves. Grape leaves are full of vitamins. Olives were so important to the ancient Greeks. They were used for olive oil for cooking, olives for eating, and then they were also used for lamps to create light and for beauty products. Olive trees, just like grapes, grow great in the sunny, dry Greek climate with really mild winters, and olive trees can last for years and years. Some of the trees pictured here are really old, so they just keep on producing and providing olives. The Greeks believed that the goddess Athena brought olive trees to Greece. So olive oil was used in almost all of the dishes that the ancient Greeks would have cooked. And even today, Greeks consume more olives than people in any other country. So olives technically fall into the veggie food group, but when we're talking about olive oil, we're talking about a really healthy oil, and oils fall into sometimes foods. So to get the oil out of the olive, the ancient Greeks would press the olive seeds with a stone press and extract the oil that way. And one really fun fact about olive oil is that the winners of the Olympics were paid in olive oil. So first they were given an olive branch, and that was a token of peace and that the fight was over with the other competitors. But they were paid in vast, huge quantities of olive oil. The top winner could take 5 tons of olive oil home. And of course, he couldn't have eaten all that olive oil, so really it was something that he was going to sell and make a lot of money and get really rich. So grains, grapes, and olives were the 3 main foods found in basically every meal in ancient Greece. So for example, a simple breakfast or snack would have been bread dipped in wine or in olive oil. The Greeks ate lots of other super healthy foods from the other food groups as well. And the ancient Greeks felt that food was really connected to the gods. So they felt that food was what separated them from both gods and animals, because gods didn't eat food and animals ate raw food, whereas Greeks cooked their food. And then they also tied certain gods to certain kinds of foods. So when they drank wine or had grapes, they were thinking about the god Dionysus, who was a part of the grapes and the wine. And when they had bread, they were thinking about Persephone, who was part of the bread itself. So the fourth most important kind of crop that the Greeks grew were legumes or pulses, like chickpeas, those chickpeas you can see in the center there. Chickpeas, lentils, and other kinds of dry beans fall into our protein food group, and they were widely grown across Greece to provide protein from vegetables that everybody had access to. The ancient Greeks also got their protein from lots and lots of fish and seafood. They were surrounded by ocean. They could have a lot of fresh fish and seafood. They also did eat animals, and most of the time when they were eating a domesticated animal like a goat or a sheep, it was part of a religious ceremony where they were sacrificing to the gods and then eating the meat afterwards. And in fact, this is one way that very poor people would get their meat. It would be shared from a religious ceremony. But otherwise, the Greeks did not often eat their domesticated animals, but they did eat wild animals that they trapped and caught. In fact, many Greeks thought that eating domesticated animals was something that only barbarians did. They liked to compare themselves to their neighbors, the barbarians, and think that they were superior. They did have meat, especially sheep and goats, on their holidays. And around 500 BC, chickens began to show up in Greece, and so they had chicken eggs, and they also ate lots of other kinds of eggs. The seafood, like the shellfish and the octopus and squid and other fish, did not have to be sacrificed to a god before they were eaten. In fact, the oldest recipe known from Greece is a recipe for fish slices cooked with cheese and olive oil. What about dairy? The ancient Greeks had goats and some cows, and so they did get milk, but they didn't often drink the milk just plain. They thought that was for barbarians. But they did make cheese, and one of the main cheeses that they made was feta cheese, which is made out of goat's milk. What about the vegetable food group? The Greeks ate lots and lots of fresh vegetables. They had bountiful vegetables and lots of greens. I have a picture of a dandelion green there. They ate also cucumbers and lots of vegetables in the onion family, like garlic and leeks and green onions. And they had lots of fruits. They had figs, they had apples, and they ate fruit a lot for dessert. Dessert could have been fruits, it could have also been nuts, they had almonds, and to sweeten things they used honey. So they made honey cakes, or they would put honey in their yogurt. So today we're going to make ancient Greek pita pizzas. So to make these pizzas, we're going to be putting them in the oven, just like the top picture there. You can see there's an ancient Greek woman, and she's working over a earthen clay oven, and she's probably baking bread in there. So we'll bake our pizzas in our oven. Right below that, you can see a whole bunch of women who are kneading and making bread. So you can see how important grains and bread were. And then there's also a picture on this page of a woman grating cheese. So we'll be using pita flatbreads, and we can use whole grain. That would be a good idea because that would be a lot like ancient Greece. We're going to be using cheese. We're going to put some goat cheese on because that would be what they would definitely have. But we'll also add a little bit of mozzarella. Mozzarella is a soft cheese you make out of cow's milk. So they might have made a soft cheese out of cow's milk too. We cannot use tomato sauce on this pizza because tomatoes were not in ancient Greece. Tomatoes come from the Americas in the New World, and the explorers bring them back much, much later. So we can't put tomatoes on our pizza if we want it to be really authentic to ancient Greece. But we can add lots of veggies. So we can add some onions and maybe some artichokes, and some spinach would be good. So that means our pizza will have grains, vegetables, dairy, and some olive oil. So it'll have 3 main food groups. And here's the recipe that we're going to be using. So let's get started. Let's make our ancient Greek pita pizzas. So we have lots of beautiful fresh ingredients here. We're going to be using some spinach, and I've got some artichoke hearts and olives. And because we can't use tomatoes, we're going to make a different kind of sauce, and it's going to have kind of a little acidic flavor like tomatoes. It's going to be made out of lemons and olive oil and Italian seasoning. So before we get started, we have to preheat our oven to 375. So mine is already going. And now we're going to squeeze the juice of a lemon. So we need a 1/4 cup of lemon juice. So I'm going to cut this lemon in slices so that I can juice it. You could also use bottled lemon juice. That would be fine too. Kids, you can help squeeze this lemon. You can squeeze it over a sieve if you want to make sure you don't get any seeds. Just squeeze it really hard. Let's see how much juice I got out of 1 lemon. Oh, it's only 1/8 of a cup. I need another lemon. Now I have enough. So I'm going to pour this into a bowl because we're going to make the dressing in this bowl. And I'm making enough for 4 pita pizzas, but you could make just 2 or you could make more. Next, we need a teaspoon of minced garlic, and we can use garlic powder or we can use fresh garlic. So I'm going to crack this garlic clove and chop this up. So 1 clove of garlic was about a teaspoon, and I'm going to put that right into the dressing. And now we're going to use a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, or you could use 1/2 teaspoon of basil, 1/2 teaspoon of oregano. I'm going to actually add a little bit of rosemary. That should add a nice Greek flavor. Now we're going to add 1/2 cup of olive oil to the dressing. That might be a little bit too much dressing, but if it is, we can always use it on salad. Now we're going to whisk it up, and this is a great job for kids. Whisk up this dressing, make it really nice and well mixed. Kids are great at measuring all these ingredients too. All right, that's thickening up nicely. This would make a really great salad dressing, wouldn't it? Now what we have to do is arrange our pita breads on our baking sheets. And I have 2 different kinds here. I have a whole wheat one, and then I have one that's made out of just white flour. So I'm going to try both. Then I've got the other 2 over here. We're going to brush our dressing on our pita breads. This is almost like putting on the tomato sauce. Now we're going to prep our veggies, so we'll start by chopping up our spinach. Once you get your spinach all washed and trim off the stems, then you can shred it up or you can cut it with scissors. That works really well, and that's really fun for anybody to do. So the recipe says about 4 cups. So there's our 4 cups of spinach. So now we have to do 6 tablespoons of olives, and you could use green or black, or you could leave the olives out if you don't want olives. You can put cherry tomatoes on yours, but I'm going to add artichoke hearts instead. So I can do about 1/2 cup of artichoke hearts, and maybe I'll add some of these capers too. Now we're going to pour the extra dressing on top of the veggies and toss that around. Now we're going to spread the veggies on top of the pitas, like this. This is looking really healthy. I wonder how you'll like pizza without tomato sauce. I have a bit of extra dressing that I can use for salad dressing too. Now we get to add 1 cup each of feta, which is a cheese made from goat's milk. And ancient Greeks definitely had a lot of goat's milk cheese. And then we're going to add a little bit of shredded mozzarella, which is a soft cheese made from cow's milk. And they might have made a similar kind of cheese as well. So there's a cup of feta. So that means that each of my pizzas should be getting a 1/4 cup of feta. So let's just kind of sprinkle that on and maybe crumble it a little bit so every pizza gets the same amount about. And then we're going to top it with a cup of mozzarella. You might decide to make yours only with mozzarella, and that's fine too. You could use lots of other kinds of veggies too. I'm going to add a few slices of red onion on the top just for fun. That looks good. And even though the ancient Greeks didn't have tomatoes because they come from the New World in the Americas, you could put tomatoes on yours too, right? All right, that's it. Now we put them in the oven and we bake them for about 8 minutes until we see the cheese looks melted and the pitas start to look a little bit toasted. So we put them right in the oven, just like in the picture of the woman baking bread in that earthen oven. But ours is electric or gas, much easier. Here they are. I actually had to cook mine an extra 3 minutes, so that was 11 minutes total in my oven. Now let's slice it up and try it. Wow, this looks really good. I can't wait to give it a try. It's really delicious and lemony. I love it. Look, you can also make a quick salad with the extra dressing that you have left over. Great! I hope you get a chance to try this really, really easy pizza recipe. It's pretty different and it's pretty delicious. Bye!